What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Existential Stoic podcast. This is episode 50. You're going to die.
You are.
Taking life seriously. I'm Randy. That's my buddy, Danny. What's going on, Danny?
What's up, Randy?
So today's episode, we are talking about life and the antithesis of life, death, and why that's important, why realizing that you're going to die is very, very important. Yeah, so what are your thoughts on this, Danny?
Well, I guess, when I was thinking about this originally, I was thinking of the Stoic idea, Memento Mori, right? To the reminding ourselves of the inevitability of death. But I was also thinking of the existentialists, especially Sartre and Camus, they remind us over and over again that, we're basically thrown into existence. The only truth that we know, or the only certainty in life, is that we're going to die. And basically that's it. And then we have to there's no guidebook. We have to make our way, right? But I mean, it's funny. I think one of the things that I guess drew me to this topic is, all these different philosophers, recognize the crucial role that death plays, because we are mortal, right? We're mortal beings. We know we're going to die, and we're also self-aware. And if we are aware of our death, does that make us take life more seriously? Does it make us think of life differently? Because, I think most people, you could argue, ignore the issue of their death, right? They totally ignore it. And then when death does happen, not to them, but to others, it's a huge thing. And it's hard to deal with. And I think there's something to be said for if we think about our own death and we take that seriously, we can also take life seriously, but also have a better relationship to death.
Yeah. I think one of the most important things to take from death is that it does give value to life. Everything that we have is only here for a short period of time. And so you can enjoy it that much more. But it's actually a benefit that you can think about the death of yourself or of other things, because then you can actually enjoy it. Like, for instance, I have this mug. I know that one day it's going to break. So because of that, I can actually value this mug and be like, this is awesome. It holds coffee. I also really like it. Keeps my hands warm. And when it does break, I can be like, oh, that's the nature of it. It died. Now I can let go.
Everything's impermanent. You know what I also love about it too? It's on the one hand, it's when you really think about it, everything does end. We all die. On the one hand, it's kind of freeing. It's so I can do whatever I want because none of this ultimately matters, right? There's no there's nothing that's going to happen after, whatever. On the other hand, it also is this kind of pressure, right? And anxiety to get it right, or this pressure to do it right, because it's oh shit, I only have one chance. And and the overall, our life is a blip. And I think that's to what you're speaking about, right? This value that it gives our lives. If we really lived forever, things wouldn't have the same kind of meaning, the same kind of immediacy, the same kind of importance. And in a way, I think that's one of our biggest problems that we all face, is we get caught up in stuff and we forget that this ends, and we start to kind of forget what really matters, or what really matters to us, what's really valuable. Because I think that's one of the things about reflecting on death can get us, is a better sense of what's important to us.
Yeah, we can, because as humans, we're able to kind of get used to anything. I mean, you look at people in those terrible situations who get used to it. And even living in first world countries, we get used to being able to order from Amazon and get it the next day. We get used to stores open 24 hours. We get used to all of these things. So our ability to get used to stuff is unlimited, but the death actually puts an end to it. So we can only get used to life so much because eventually it's going to end.
I think we were just talking about that on the phone earlier, that idea of the hedonic treadmill, right? That, we literally get used to things so quickly, and we work real hard to get a nicer house. We get it. And then almost immediately we get used to it and we realize it's a better house. And it's we don't even take time to enjoy things. We don't take time to appreciate things. And we just are in this constant sort of treadmill, running after something, but getting nowhere. Right.
So, we should talk about that, because I think that's a really important part of this whole death of everything, is actually enjoying the life of it. Yeah. Because even okay, so let's say that death, or most people who are ever born are dead. Most of the existence of the universe you're going to spend dead. So life is actually this really interesting blip for a very fraction, a sliver of time where you're alive. So like, how can someone best enjoy that? And
I think that
I'll start.
okay, I was gonna say you're getting to the question, like the question, right? Go ahead.
Well, actually, okay, so it's the question. But yesterday I was walking at the park and I was listening to Jim Rohn, who's like a motivational speaker. And he says that like with life, you need to basically reflect on it, review it. You know,
Yeah.
each day you should reflect on your day and see what you did and the impact it did. And each week you should reflect on your week, and each month reflect on the month, and each year reflect on the year. And it reminded me very much of what we were talking about with the small delights, where every day at the end of the day you reflect on those things that you're grateful for, those great moments, because you start building up this collection of what is your life and the things that actually make a difference to you. And you're able to see that, yes, I'm going to die, but I lived, and here's proof.
It's funny you mentioned that because like Socrates famously said, right, the unexamined life is not worth living. And philosophers always interpret that as, well, like it's the pursuit of knowledge, right? The pursuit of wisdom. And I think that is part of it. But I also think the other part of it is very practical. It's just that idea, right, of examining your life, reflecting on it, being grateful. Because when you do that, you're also you're forcing yourself to recognize what was good, what's valuable, what struggles you went through, how you overcame. Like you're actually forcing yourself to take a moment to live and be present rather than, we so quickly move on to the next thing. I think that that's part of the reason why we struggle with this. And like the small delay thing that we talk about constantly, because it was like the most valuable thing I've ever done in the shortest amount, the easiest, but it builds that awareness, and it just snowballs over time, right? And it has this huge cumulative effect. It's crazy.
Yeah. Another thing that I think is interesting is you talk about the hedonic treadmill, and that comes about because we don't know when is enough.
Yeah.
So like an exercise that I like to do is asking what is enough, and then also trying to live well below that too. So like trying to live on the least amount possible. I forget, somebody was saying how like it was probably one of the Stoics, I think I read in the 4-Hour Work Week, how they were talking about how every once in a while you should go and live by the lowest means possible. And because
kind of remind yourself of what you have, right? And all the advantages that you have now.
yeah, because there's like a downside and an upside. And so the downside is effectively like zero, like food, clothing, water, shelter. Okay.
Yeah.
The upside is unlimited. You can literally go up forever. Like we were talking about this yesterday, how I have a $3,000 car that I think is the best car on the face of the planet. Like I don't think any car could ever do better than that. And it was $3,000. And yet I can go to the Lambo dealership and buy a $300,000 car. It's not going to be, 100 times better than the car that I have. So,
we were talking about though, it's like, it's funny because it's like when you have no car, right? A car puts you up like way up real fast. And that car could be $1,000, could be 3,000. As long as it runs, basically you shoot up. But then as you go up higher from that, the payoff starts to become to cost, starts to just kind of get very, very low, right? We're like, what's the difference between a $125,000 car and a $200,000 car? Probably pretty much really superficial things like, oh, it's got double stitch Italian leather instead of single stitch, right? Like it's these really stupid things, or like, oh, the steering wheel thing was like, polished with someone's balls or something and like retarded, right? Like it's like, these really dumb differences. But I think that's part of the problem. But we always imagine that there's this thing that's better, right? And I think that's the difficulty. But you're right. I think I love that example. Like, I was listening to something today, and they were talking about, a woman was talking about growing up in Russia, and she was like, we didn't have washing machines. And she's like, so you did your laundry by hand. And she's like, when you live there, though, you don't think about it because that's the only way you do it. That's how you do laundry. She's like, but when I got here to this country, she's like, I couldn't imagine going back. But she's like, I also take for granted the washing machine. It's like stuff like that's so funny because we can all do that. If you have a washer and dryer at home, take your clothes to a laundromat once in a while and see what it's like to do that. Even like, I know that sounds small, but it's just a way to remind yourself of what you have at home, of the good things you do have, right? You can, walk to work one day.
And also you can see the benefit of doing it the old way. Yeah. So like, for instance, I have both used washing machines and dryers, and I have washed by hand and air dried. And I can say, aside from the work that goes into it, I prefer washing by hand and air drying. And here's why. It's a lot faster, and you get like fresh air clothes. Like we buy
Oh,
all
yeah.
these fabric softeners to imitate fresh air. You hang something up to dry outside, it smells like fresh air when you put it on. It's awesome.
Well, that's a good one too, right? I mean, I actually like hanging up clothes is a great way, and they actually prolongs their life too because they're not getting beat up in that thing all the time. But it's funny, it's like these little things I think we can all do, but it's we get so accustomed to what we consider the norm, and we're never really. I think it's one of our difficulties, right? Is we're always pushing beyond what we have rather than ever stopping to appreciate it. And like you were mentioning, right? Rather than thinking about what we do need, like we all like think of like the technologies most of us have, like the computer, cell phone, cameras, whatever. Most people, when they try and get when they get them, they try to maximize what they can get. They spend all their money or they go in debt trying to get the best of the best, rather than ask themselves, what do I really need? What am I actually using this device for? Am I just going on the internet and using word processing? I don't need a fancy gaming laptop. You're not doing anything with it, right? You're not content creating. You're not doing anything that's going to be graphically demanding. It's same with like cell phones. Do you need the newest phone every 6 months? No, no one does really. So it's like trying to figure out what we really need. And then I think there is value in that because when you get something, you hold on to it for a while. When you get the new thing, they've upgraded like 4 or 5 times at that point, and it is a big jump. You start to really appreciate it. And I think you appreciate what you have more too, because you see that it's still sufficient, it still works.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love buying things that are like less expensive or used because then I'm not afraid to break it.
Oh god.
Because part of discovering something is sometimes breaking it. And so when you get a used car or a used piece of technology or something that's so inexpensive that if it breaks you can just buy another, then you're like, oh, I'm just going to mess this up with the idea that if it breaks, I'll buy another because I just learned a lot of stuff. Whereas if you get like the ultimate one, you're afraid to touch it. You're like, oh no, if I break something, I'm done. Yeah.
It's funny too. You're right that I think you have a different relationship with it when you're able to own it outright. When you're able to do what you want with it, you have a different relationship with it, and you actually get more out of it. And I think that people don't see that because they're so. But I think that whole drive to have the next and the best, to spend all this money, it's also this trying to impress others. And I think this is also the other thing. I think that inevitability of death, remembering that we die, and taking our own lives seriously, part of the way that we bring meaning to our lives and we're able to have a good life too, is also recognizing that the outside really doesn't matter when it comes to how I value my life, right? And if we get out of that thinking, we're not trying to keep up with the Joneses and the Karens or whatever the names are that people use these days for that kind of thing. You're actually doing you're thinking about yourself, what you need, and you're getting something out of it rather than worrying about what you need to impress others, because it really doesn't impress anyone and no one cares.
Well, that's a very good point. And we talked about that in the other one, like being more impressive or something, like being more influential. And yeah, because like so many times people are trying to impress other people that they don't even like, and people that are going to be dead in 100 years. And people are so afraid of trying stuff because they're like, oh, I might make a mistake. I might get embarrassed. And it's like, yeah, but guess what? Everybody who you're embarrassed from, you'll be dead. Like everybody will be dead. So but people hold themselves back from living their ideal life because they're afraid of these other people.
Yeah, I think, to that note too, I think one way we can kind of start getting beyond that too, and I think we might have talked about this before, is really imagining what we would regret on our deathbeds, like, and trying to really picture, because imagination is so awesome because it's so powerful, and it's such a great way when you start to really do it, whether you do it like in writing it down or trying to like just think about it in your head, like really thinking about, like, if I were to die in 10 years, would I regret not doing this thing? Would I regret that I didn't purchase the newest phone or whatever? And really asking yourself, like, what of these things matters? Because when it comes down to it, it's all about the things that we value. It's all about what will actually improve our lives, not, these external things like worrying about other people that matters, because we can't control that. And at the end of the day, who cares?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I always like using 6 months because that is like a very tangible time frame. Whereas 10 years, I can be like, oh, I'll be, 10 years down the line. But 6 months, that makes it real, because then all of a sudden you're like, everything that I wanted to do in my life, I have to do in 6 months, or at least figure out of those things that I wanted to do, which ones would I regret the most not doing if I expire in 6 months.
I really like that too, because that also puts in the immediacy of, and the reality that when I make choices, whatever it is, I'm also making choices not to do things. whether implicitly or explicitly, right? So if you're talking about, like getting a new job or trying something, like if you think about in terms of 6 months, is it that important that you should do it now, that you would regret not taking a shot, not trying it? Even if you, and I think that's important too, is like, there's a lot of things in life that I know, like even if I failed, it wouldn't matter, because it's the taking the chance that matters. It's knowing that I at least put myself out there, at least tried. And I think so many people fear that so much because they're so still concerned with other people. They're concerned with the other, not with themselves. And I think that's kind of what I meant by taking life seriously too, is like taking your own life seriously. Like, this is it. You have one shot, right? What are you going to do that's going to really make it matter?
I actually think you kind of hit the nail on the head there, talking about like, why aren't you taking your life seriously? But at the same time, this immense fear, like the fear of death is one of the biggest fears that people have. And oftentimes we put the fear of death on everything else. Like, we put the fear of death on the embarrassment we'll get from doing this thing in front of other people or from trying and failing. All of those things, we put the fear of death on that. So let's kind of take a look at the fear of death. What is that, and how can we address that? Because that, like I know rationally or intellectually, or at least I believe that, like death is kind of one of the biggest releases you have. But I still have a very, very strong fear of death. Like, I still get on top of a tall building and my legs wobble. Like, so.
Well, I think like the Epicurean said, right? Like, you have nothing to fear with death, because when death comes, you're no longer aware, right? So if life is being aware, if life is experiencing, death is the cessation of experience, the cessation of awareness, right? So there's, if you imagine what life was like before you were born, that's effectively what death is, right? So there's nothing to fear there, right? There's no pain. One of the things I think, some philosophers have identified is the reason why we fear death is because we're thinking about death in the sense of losing others. So we're thinking of it from the standpoint of like, how others will feel, or how that death will affect others, and there's, look, if you have kids, if you have people you love, right? Dying is scary in the sense that, yes, you won't see them anymore, things like that, but you're not thinking of it in the sense of your own life ending, right? There's a difference there. So that's one way, is to kind of think of it like, well, if it's truly the end, right? It's the end. So there's nothing really to worry in that sense. That doesn't mean, I think, I think that can motivate us to take some risk, but still being at the top of the building, we still might shake a little, because it doesn't mean we want to die either, right? And I think there is an important distinction between like wanting to die on the one hand versus like recognizing the inevitability of it, living with it, accepting it. And I think, one good practice, I think too, is just recognizing that, look, all the things in life, existence itself, it's amazing. And it's amazing in part because it's constantly changing. It's always evolving. And for that to happen, things have to be destroyed and be created, right? That process goes together, that ebb and flow, that yin and yang. And like, if we recognize that life is this amazing thing, then we just got to accept death is just a part of it. It's not good or bad. It's just part of the process. And really, I think reminding yourself that is a way to kind of help you get there. It doesn't mean you're not going to be sad when people die. It's not going to mean that you're not going to, I think it's just a way to kind of help us make sense of it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of looking at it. And while you were saying that, something came to mind for me. So like, I know when I have this belief that after death, awesome. Okay. Up until death, awesome. That moment of death, like there's fear of pain, there's fear of confusion, and just like not feeling safe, not feeling secure. So like that's the part, at least for me, that I'm fearful of. And so
I was going to say also, well, no, I mean, I am also like, I think a lot of people are terrified too of degressing, not dying, but also losing our sense of self, losing who we are. And I think that's a very real fear, right? So I think that's part of it too, is it's not that we fear necessarily death, we fear the process of dying, or we feel like the slow degradation of self that can happen. That is terrifying, it can be terrifying, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so the one thing that kind of struck me is, like, I know in my living life, like the part of my life before my death, I focus very much on positive visualization. So I think that's very, very useful for using. And I haven't applied that yet to the moment of death. Like, I have this negative visualization of it. And that kind of opened up my eyes to where I can actually make that a positive visualization. Like, like Tyrion Lannister from Game of Thrones, somebody asked him, how do you want to die? And he's like, well, hopefully in bed with a glass of wine and a young girl. But using positive visualization like that, so that it may happen like that, but even if it doesn't, you haven't spent your whole entire life fearing this event.
No, I think that's a good way to look at it. I like that idea too. Trying to make it again, it's using imagination, right? The other side of it too, I think, is also like if we just start being more aware of it, not denying it, not hiding from it, and recognizing that it's just a part of life, it also sort of it demystifies death and it makes it less scary because we're no longer we're always, instead of always running from it, you face it, you confront it, you look at it, and you recognize that everything still goes on, right? We're not that important. Yeah, it can be hard, but if we deal with the deaths that we encounter in our lives of others, of pets, of friends, whatever, we can deal with them in a healthy way. We can celebrate the life that was a part of our lives, the enjoyment we had, rather than look at it negatively. Like, we don't have to look at all these things positively. I mean, negatively. There's a choice there, right? Like, if you lose a good friend, you can look at how they impacted your life, how great it was that you had that time, right? And that's true for you too when you go. And I think when we start to sort of just confront it more, we also it becomes less scary, it becomes less, less a part of this thing that we don't understand.
Yeah, I think we spend so much time trying to find the best life, and oftentimes we don't think that much about the best death. And I was thinking about kind of in olden days how they would think like an honorable death, dying in battle, or standing up for something that you believed in. And nowadays that's kind of changed, where I don't know what an honorable death would be nowadays, but
no, I was gonna say I really like that. Like, what about like the idea of a good death, right? Like, I like that idea, and in the sense of like, what does a good death come from? It comes from a good life. So I think that's the other thing is like, if you live your life in the right way, if you don't have regrets, you have nothing to fear from death, because you did, like, there's nothing. People are afraid of death because they're afraid of losing the stuff that they have now. They're afraid of losing their distractions because they're afraid. But if you can accept it, it's a good death, because if you lived your life in the right way, there's nothing to worry about. You're not trying to take anything with you. You've done all the things you wanted to do. You've done all the things that were important. You valued what was important to you. There's nothing to fear, right? The end is not scary in that case.
that's a very good point. Yeah. So then the goal, they talk about the cure to fear is action, taking action. So like the longer you delay taking action, the bigger the fear gets. So this fear of death that everybody has is because we're not taking action. And it's not taking action as in like go kill yourself, because that's that's addressing.
Nah.
It's taking action as in living your life to the best of your ability, because that's taking action in the face of death. And that's even courage, like being fearful of dying and being fearful of being embarrassed and all these other things, and taking action. That's called courage, and that is something that you can do now. Yeah.
No, I think that's exactly it, right? It's like having that courage to act, to do what's right for you, to live the life you want, is also having the courage to face death, because you're not afraid. You're not losing anything. And I think you hit the nail on the head, right? All these people that are afraid, that we fear these things, it's people that are not living in the right way. They're not acting. They're not able to make themselves do the things they want. So they're afraid because they're afraid if they run out of time, they still haven't done anything, right? And it's like, if you could just focus, and I think that's part of it, right? We're so focused on distracting ourselves from death and denying it that we're also not living. And that's why the two go together, right? Is that to really live your life, you have to be aware of death, because they go together. That is life. Like, if you forget one, or you also forget the other in a way.
So how does somebody make that transition? Like, let's say there's stuff they really want to do, they're not doing it because they're scared, or maybe they're just stuck in a career that they don't like, or some family situation they don't like. I mean, but they're too afraid to move. It's comfortable. It's good enough. They can just eke out the next 30 years or so, kind of get by.
I think that's just it though, right? If we talk about, recognizing that we're going to die, facing the inevitability of death, and taking life seriously, you can't just be comfortable, right? That's not going to work. And so I think part of the first thing you need to do is start imagining your death. Start imagining, what would I regret if I died in 6 months? Would I be unhappy that I stayed in this job? Would I be unhappy that I stayed in this relationship? Would I be unhappy that I went to that Christmas dinner or whatever, right? What things would I be miserable about? What relationships are burdening me? And what does that tell me about my values, about what I should be doing? And I think it's a great exercise too to find out, what matters to me, what really is important. Have I always wanted to play a certain instrument? Have I always wanted to go into this career or that career? Have I, and what the fuck am I doing that I'm not doing these things now? Right? Like, why am I holding back from trying to make my life as good as possible and do all the things that I want in the limited time that I have?
Yeah. Like, we got to stop pretending like we've got 1,000 years to live. I
Yeah.
think that it's very easy to get caught in this kind of passive mode where, like, I'll do it later. Later doesn't exist. It has never existed in my life. I've always imagined it does, but really the only thing that ever exists is right now.
Yeah.
And one thing that I did the other day was I was doing the 6 month, like, if I die in 6 months, what things have I left undone? And this,
That's a good one.
I like the wording of it because it's like, if I die, what have I left undone? These, like, laters that I have, what have I left undone? And then taking a look at that list and which ones do I actually really, really not want to leave undone?
That's a great one too for like prioritization, right? And like getting down what really matters. But I think at the heart of it too, what we're really talking about too is like taking your own life seriously and starting to really think about, what does your life look like? What does your life actually, what does it mean to you? What does living your life look like to you? Because it's going to be different for everybody. I think this is the crucial thing, is like getting down. What are my values? What's important? It's insane that we don't do this. That most people don't do this, right? It seems to me like so crazy that, like, and I get it though, because it's also easy to get distracted in this world. It's easy
Wait,
to be, whatever. And like, but yeah.
yeah, I think a lot of people don't do this because we're kind of caught up in life. And then bad stuff happens and we're like, my life sucks. And
Right.
then we start looking at the answers, but at that point it's a very difficult time because we're saying, like, figure out what you want to do. And most of the time when people are in that negative mind space, they're like, oh, my life sucks, I don't want to do anything, I hate everything, this all stinks, I don't have any goals, I don't. And so, like, finding a
Wow.
way to transition from that negative place to a place of positive creation.
I think one thing, a couple things that really helped me were obviously the small delights thing, doing that, because trying to get to that positive thinking, seeing what you're grateful for, seeing what's pleasurable is a great way to start helping you kind of get that energy back if you really do lack it. And I've been in that place before. And I think part of it too is just really, it's hard. It's very hard. But journaling and stuff, taking a good look at yourself and really also looking at the fact that, like, it's not going to change unless you change it. Nothing, no magic wand's going to be waved, right? Blame everybody you want. It doesn't fucking matter at the end of the day. I mean, at the end of the day, right? It's your life and you have to live it. And that's what we mean by taking it seriously, right? Like, and I
I
think
think,
it's hard though, but you have to force yourself to do it.
well, what
Yeah.
you're saying there is really important, is that it's hard and you can get through it.
Yeah.
I think those are the two most important things. Like,
Yeah.
it's going to be hard. There's no way around it. It's going to be
Yeah.
hard. It stinks sometimes.
And it's going to
But
continue to be hard at times. Like,
yeah,
that's just it. Like,
but that being said, you can get through it. That's
yeah.
also really important. Because it's like, it's deluding people to tell them that, oh, it's going to be easy, you just need to do this and you just need to do that. It's not. It's going to be hard, but you
Well,
can get through it. You can endure through it.
and you've gotten through things before, right? You can get through this now. And the other side of it too is like, yes, it'll be hard. Yes, it'll be hard in the future again too. But once you start once you start taking it seriously, once you start being accountable, taking responsibility, living your own life, it's also infinitely better. I think it was Kierkegaard who said that. Like, Kierkegaard said, I'm going to butcher it, but it's something along the lines like, no one who has lived authentically would ever say it was an easy life, but they would also say that it's the greatest life. And I always love that quote because it is the most difficult way to live, is to live your own life and take it seriously, but it's also the greatest. So it's like, it's that recognition that, like, it is so great because it's so difficult, but it's so difficult because it's also your own. And I
Yeah,
always really like that. Yeah.
that is a great quote. Like, I can definitely see that, where, like, for a while my life had these steps. It was like, go to high school, do well, go to college, get married, get a
Mhm.
professional career, and, like, all these steps. And it was easy because it wasn't my life, but
And
I
it's
hated
empty, right? Yeah. Yeah.
it.
It's easy. It's easy because somebody's telling, it's funny. It's like somebody else is telling you what to do. They're setting the goals. They're setting the little markers. It's great. It's easy to follow it, but it's totally fucking empty because it's not your life. It's not your values. It's not what matters to you. And look, the other side of that too is like, I mean, I'm like almost 40, you're almost 40. I'm happy that I realize this now. I don't, it's like, so what that it's like now I can at least do it, right? And I think it's like whether you're 25 or 60, you always have time to start and you can make it your life and make it awesome. I think that's what matters.
Yeah. And like now so much nowadays, people think that you have to have it all figured out when you're young. Like that's the big, like spend 30 years from when you're 18 to 48, spend 30 years messing up, make 30 years of mistakes. Okay. Non-life-threatening mistakes and nothing that puts you in prison because those are too far, but spend the rest of your life screwing up. Then you have all those years of experience to draw upon to live the second half of your life the best that you possibly can.
Yeah. No, I think you're right too. It's funny because like that was true like 400 years ago when most people die when they were like 20. Yeah, you to get moving early. You did not want to. But now it's like, you're right. I mean, we have in a way, we have more time than ever. Our lives are longer than ever, and they're healthier than ever in the sense like cognitively and stuff. So take advantage of that, dude. But like, yeah, I think it's like this idea of taking life seriously. You have to think of your own death. You have to recognize that that's inevitable because it's the only way to get to that point where you start to live your life seriously and live your action. I mean, I guess that's the crucial thing too, is live your life, right? Not somebody else's, not an empty life, but your own life. And I think that's the important part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I guess that's kind of it. What would you say the takeaways are from this episode? I would say definitely recognizing that death is going to happen, and actually challenging the fear associated with it.
Well, I think too, understanding that how it's freeing too, by recognizing that everyone dies, you don't have to worry about all those people anymore. Like it kind of makes all their opinions pointless, right? Because they all end up in the same place no matter how they do it. It doesn't matter. So I think there is that freeing side of it, but it's also that like getting you to be, put that fire under your butt, right? And get moving too, and recognize that.
Another exercise that I do from time to time is go spend time in a cemetery.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
Because you can see how many people are dead. And it really, really hit me when I went to a cemetery and there were classmates there.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy.
Who died young. And that like really hit because, you see all these graves from the Civil War and stuff like that and whatever else. But then like these were people who I was in second grade with and third grade with and fourth grade with. And like, that's when it really hits because they're not here. And I'm still here. And it's like, wow, I really have an opportunity to make the most of this.
Well, it's funny, like when you hear people talk about who have like a near-death experience where like they get in a serious car accident or something, but they come out of it, they survive cancer or something, like a terminal illness. You always hear them talk about life differently because it's like they all of a sudden, like they were living like we all do, distracted, denying it and all of a sudden death became very real to them, very real. And it's like afterwards, it's like everything's a bonus because it's like, oh shit, like that could have been it. All these years of bonus. I think it's a helpful way to also think of our lives, which is we could die at any moment. So any moment we're not dead is also a bonus. We should be using it, not wasting it. I think that's another kind of.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And doing, journaling to write down the best parts of your day. That's a way to be grateful for this bonus. Because if you want more bonus, be grateful for the bonus you get. Like if I buy somebody ice cream and they don't say thank you, I'm not going to buy them ice cream again. But
never again.
If they're profusely grateful for that ice cream, I'm probably going to buy them some more ice cream. So do the same thing with the universe. Let the universe give you some more ice cream,
Yeah, I think you're right there, right? Being grateful, writing things down, getting clear on what we want and what we want our life to look like. And at the very bottom too, recognizing that, this is your life. You have to live it. You have to take it seriously because nobody else is going to do it for you. I think those are the biggest things.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, I think this was a mind-opening episode for me.
Yeah,
definitely.
I got a lot from too. I did too. I loved it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us for episode 50 of the Existential Stoic podcast.
Half to 100.
You're going to die.
Yes, you are.
Life seriously. I'm Randy. That's my buddy Danny. I'll see you later, Danny.
Later, Randy.